GM everyone. Hi. Welcome to this workshop today. Today we're gonna talk about how to contribute to open source projects on Celo. And I have an amazing guest, my favorite guest so far, Cyndie Kamal from Celo Africa DAO, the dev lead. And thank you so much for joining me today. Maybe we can kick off by just like quickly introducing ourselves, and then I will share with everyone what we're going to be talking about today. But yeah, please introduce yourself.
Okay, hi everyone. My name is Cyndie Kamau. I'm the developer relations lead for Celo Africa DAO. I'm also a blockchain developer. And I'm so glad to see you guys today. And welcome to our workshop on open source on Celo.
Yeah, thank you so much for being here. Just for everybody who doesn't know Cyndie, she has been contributing a lot to open source projects and also getting rewarded for that. So very happy to be sitting here with an expert today. I'm Lena. I'm developer relations engineer at Celo Foundation. I am a developer, but now mainly focusing on creating the best builders experience for all of you in the Celo ecosystem. Hi, Ebenezer. And let's dive right into what we will be talking about today. We will very quickly cover what is open source and why Celo is open source and why we are focusing on open source contributions on the in the Celo ecosystem. Then we will go through contribution guidelines, what are do's, what are don'ts. I will ask Cyndie a lot of questions about her experience. Please feel free to at any point put in questions in the chat, and we will also pull them up and try to answer that as best as possible. And in the end, we will also introduce the Curing campaign that just started this Monday. It's called the Souts Game, and it is run by Chamworth, and Celo is participating in it. So we will share just like more details on what projects on the Celo ecosystem will participate, and also how the whole project is working, how you can sign up for it, and also kind of discuss future opportunities in open source in the Celo ecosystem. Let's dive right into, and as I said, please ask as many questions as you have, because we will be here to answer all of them. So let's start with the motto of Celo: building with purpose, building for all. Celo is a mission first, planet positive blockchain ecosystem, leading a thriving digital economy. Also, for everybody who's new, I think everybody who's here has some knowledge on Celo still. Even if there's one we always want to share, Celo is an emerging Ethereum layer 2 designed to make blockchain technology accessible to all with our focus on scalability, low fees, and ease of use. Celo is ideal for building blockchain products that reach millions of users around the globe. Very important just to explain here, Celo has a really strong focus on stablecoins, not only dollar-pegged stablecoins, but also regional stablecoins like the Kenyan shilling and West African franc, Cereal, and also we just launched the Philippine peso, and more regional stablecoins coming soon. Also, one other very unique identifier for the Celo ecosystem is our fee abstraction, which means you can pay for gas fees in stablecoins, which kind of like falls into the accessibility and ease to use. Celo has existed for 4 years already, which means we have a thriving ecosystem and many users, which is very great. But yeah, let's get started to what is so open source. And why are we hosting this workshop? I feel like, and I would love, Cyndie, also your opinion on that, but I feel like when I started becoming a developer, I knew a lot of developers around me contributed to open source, but I felt in my position, I didn't really have the bandwidth to just like go somewhere and just contribute because I'm interested in learning. I think it is a great way to learn, but it can also be very intimidating if you don't know where to start, if you don't know the whole etiquette. And yeah, also if you're not aware that there might be rewards waiting for you. I think a lot of people that contribute to open source have the privilege of time. And I think a lot of people, like women or people from like with a background like where you just don't have so much free time to contribute to like just like learn and distribute their time for free. I think for us it's much more intimidating and much more like something that we are not used to or we don't know yet, which is what I learned. Like even when I talked to a lot of people when I went to Kenya just like 3 years ago, 3 weeks ago, some people were like, yeah, just shared with me like, yeah, could you ask for this workshop? So this is why we're offering it. But I'm also running another program just for women to like onboard them into open source contribution, because it just like it can be a scary place, and this is why we're here today to like slowly bring you into it, hold your hand, and like hope you will understand the value and soon be thriving as an open source contributor. Open source already exists since a very, very long time in Web 2, and it does offer a lot of benefits, either like for the contributors, but also for the organizations. And there's like I just wrote down a few, but like the first part is obviously global collaboration. For the organization, it's great because they get different opinions, a way more diverse mindset and experience, very updated views on what features to add, how to update the technology. So this leads also to an ecosystem of knowledge sharing, where more experienced developers help younger developers understanding the repository, giving code reviews, and all of that actually just in the spirit of collaboration and learning and contributing, which is something that is very, very beneficial. I feel like for me, learning how to code, the best way was really to get reviews and feedback on whatever I produced. I think only like that, like working with different other people, also like reviewing the code of other people, seeing how different repositories are structured, built, how other people write code. I think that's one of the best way to learn. So yeah, for beginners, it's a great way to learn, to make network and to get exposure to ecosystems. It is also really great for any project that is open source because they can leverage transparency and trust. Their code is open source. A lot of people have went through it. They will find security risks. So it's more like a community vetted code. So obviously it's more secure than if you just have a small company where you have one person that does QA and then sometimes some user finds a bug and reports that, right? So the trust in your project will also be much higher. As I said, like it's a kind of a community audit, so you have also much higher security in your project, because if the code is open source, people could just find loopholes and extort this project, but they just create an issue and solve that together. A lot of open source projects also create standards. I think everybody who has been active in the Ethereum ecosystem knows we have a lot of standards in the Celo ecosystem. We have also the some specific Celo standards, and these standards lead to also more interoperability if these are public and public accessible, that people can build up on these standards. Also, open source projects offer more flexibility and customization, because you as a user or somebody who wants to use that technology could also take that project and customize it for your needs, add several features, and yeah, it makes it also way more accessible because the code base is free for people to use, which attracts more users. A business model around that is that you would offer kind of like hosting or additional features. And also, open source projects are much faster in their innovation. As I mentioned before, you have global collaboration, you have like a much bigger community to think than just in a small project, and that just leads to more also more flexibility, as if you have a head off that has to approve every decision making. So it's very, very beneficial for projects to be open source. It is, but it's also very beneficial to contribute. As mentioned before, you get knowledge, you get networking and exposure, and you learn a lot. What role does open source play specifically in Web3 and on Celo? Again, everything that was mentioned above, obviously, but I think one of the main things is transparency and trust. As you know, most blockchains that we interact with are public. You can find the whole code base, you can raise issues, you can talk directly to the developer team, you can become a contributor, which is very important for the decentralization. The community can propose new standards and new directions that can be voted on. And for that, obviously, the code needs to be publicly accessible. Especially, as mentioned before, the security part is also very important for trusting. Like we always say, do your own research. And if you want to go really, really far, you would go to the repository, or like to the to the blockchain orgs repositories, and really go into the smart contracts and make sure that this is safe for you to use. And also you can see how decentralized blockchain is, even through reviewing all of the code. And then one important part is obviously like the Web3 principles, which is the transparency and collaboration, and especially on Celo, also prosperity for all, that we want to incentivize open source and public goods, creating technology that is open for everybody to use and will get rewarded from a public community fund. And I think that is in truth, it's the essence of Web3, which is why it's very exciting for us and Celo that we are starting to like put a bigger focus on that. One of the things that we have also gotten as feedback from many developers from our ecosystem, and that we also want to say we hear you and we want to listen to you, is that we want to offer more opportunities for developers that are not yet ready to become founders, or are not interested but are looking more for employment. Exactly these kind of open source campaigns, where we bring you together with the companies, where we reward you for contributions, are a great way to bridge the gap between being onboarded to Web3 and at one point finding a job in a bigger protocol. So what we're going to present today is just like the beginning of a bigger open source campaign that we are planning for the Celo ecosystem and for our builders. And yeah, I think just the last point here before I will hand over to Cyndie is like, why should you build open source? I know many people, like many projects in our ecosystem, build privately, and I'm looking forward to chat more with Cyndie about that, because I also got some feedback from people about what the issues I was building for building your project open source. But in general, doing that in Web3 will give you access to a lot of funding and resources if you're established and used. There's like drips campaigns, there's Gitcoin campaigns, there's like a lot of like optimism and Celo public goods that reward projects that build public goods and open source projects. And you can always actually build a paid model around your open source project. So even you can benefit from both, right? You can have a paid subscription model, and you can have an open source software that everybody is contributing to. And the great thing is also, as mentioned before, it's like you will get community support. You will not have to pay for everything that needs to be built. If your project, if you build a public good, if you are interested in paying people with just like reviewing their code, integrating them in your community, that is a great model to get contributors to your code base. But yeah, now I want to hand over to Cyndie. I think you can just share your screen. Let me add your screen. And I think then Cyndie will share more about what it means to contribute, her learnings, her experiences, and also some guidelines that you should follow when contributing first.
Okay, thank you, Lena. Thank you for that. First of all, as we continue, the first thing I would like to share is just as we continue, I'll be sharing some of the contributions on GitHub that I've done, just to give you guys a bit of a proof of work as we continue with like the contribution guidelines. But on my hand, I'll be handling the guidelines for essentially open source contribution. So normally with open source, the first thing you just normally do is you find an issue to work on, right? To give you guys an example is one of the issues which I worked on, which recently got merged. This one is based in Polkadot, so we were just mapping some of the some extra details for nodes which are running in the Polkadot ecosystem, so that they can get to be able to monitor more information about the nodes. So yeah, essentially when you check even like our Celo repository, normally you will find a list of issues in here which normally are open, right? So what essentially you just do is you scroll through and you just find a list of issues, right? So once you find a list of issues and then you decide, okay, just a second. Yeah, so once you find a list of an issue and you decide, I want to work on this already, the very most important step is to ensure that you don't get to work on an issue which is already worked on. Normally, what you do is just you go to like example, some of the core maintainers, of which you can see most of them. When you see someone who's like here, normally you know is like a core contributor or a maintainer for the repository. An example is James Wilson as a use case, right? So normally with these issues, when you decide you found an issue which you want to work on, you can always DM the or you can tag on GitHub the GitHub username for the maintainer who you want to like work on the issue, just to ensure first of all that the issue is not already assigned to someone or it's in a state where they want to work on it, because sometimes in-house the team of maintainers, they can just create a list of issues but they want to work on them on their own, right? Yeah, so just to ensure before you start working on anything and you've not been given the proper go ahead, yeah, so it's always it's always nice to just contact the guys the maintainers who are maintaining the repositories, so you can ensure that everything is like you can work on it. So once you want to get the go ahead for the issue, you normally you're assigned in GitHub the issue which you will have to work on. So very importantly, afterwards, now we can go to like the Git workflow bit, which is very important when it comes to like guidelines for open source, right? So this is assuming that now you've been assigned the duty which you're supposed to, or rather the issue which you want to work on. The most important thing is creating a fork of the repository. This is very important because most of the time in the main repository, you don't have like you don't have like a, let's call them admin right or contributor rights to the main repository, right? So you might fork the main repo and then you work on the repository, you create, you work on the feature, but when you try to like commit to the repository, you'll get an error because you don't have essentially writing rights for the repository. So it's very important to create your own fork of the repository which you can work on. So once you create a fork of the repository, you git clone the repository to your local machine, because you cannot be able to work on the repository when it's like you haven't cloned it to your local machine, so that you can able to access it with editors such as VS Code, Sublime, NeoVim, whatever whichever environment you work on, right? After doing so, you install all the dependencies. Normally with normally with the README, they're going to give you all the they're going to show you all the guidelines essentially, or they will also give you steps on how to install all the dependencies which you need so that you can be able to design a proper work environment for the a proper working environment for your code repository. So after you install all the dependencies which you need, first of all, you'll need to create a feature branch. So you use this a command, you create a feature branch for whichever feature you're working on. The reason why we use a feature branch is because you might find you're not the only one who's working on the same repository. With open source, you'll find very many people are working on different issues within the same repository. So if all of you are working on the main example, let's say all of you are working on the main repository or the dev repository, depending on the dev branch, sorry, depending on the what the main branch, how it's called. So if all of you are working on the main branch and everyone is committing, some changes are being made, it will be also quite hard to monitor all the changes and figure out who did what. So essentially, for a streamlined experience, you need to create your own feature branch based on whatever you're working on, also to ensure that in case any code changes are introduced which break the entire system, at least you don't it's worked on before it's like merged onto the main repository, right? So you create your feature branch. After that, you now work on the feature based on the issue which you are working on. Example, let's say you've noticed something is missing or an error is coming out of on how the program is running. Once you do that, you just work on your feature. Something very important to ensure you have a smooth experience for both the open source contributor and the maintainer is to ensure the code is actually working based on the based on whatever you're working on, right? So that's why you need to put a lot of tests. Normally there are three sort of tests which you put. First of all, it's the unit tests, which tests the features which you've been working on to confirm which they're working correctly. Next is the integration tests, which confirm that the piece of code that you've added, rather the new feature you've introduced, it's working in cohesiveness with the rest of the program, right? And then now afterwards, we have the third form of testing, which is the end-to-end tests, to ensure that the whole structure, or rather the whole platform, is working correctly. So once you have all the tests, sometimes you'll find in like a repository they have predefined tests already, which they've already written. So if essentially you are debugging an error or a bug, you will have all the tests. They mostly have all the tests ready, so you will just have to ensure that the tests they've put they are working correctly, and if not, you can twist them to test the logic you've added, right? But if you're working on a completely new feature, you'll now have to add a set of other tests apart from to complement the ones that they have inside, they have already predefined, right? So sorry. Now, one more important thing when it comes to open source, it's the concept of formatting and uniformity, because very many people are working on the same repository and everyone has their own way of formatting their code, has their own style of formatting their code. So normally you will find there's something we call code formatters, such as Prettier, and linters such as Solhint. Solhint is for it's linting for Solidity. Linters, it's just a way of enforcing to ensure that the code is working correctly, that there are no errors and all that thing. Just to show you an example, it's although it's in Rust, it's a this is an example of like a lint configuration for which I put in one of my projects as a workflow. So normally when you check a repository, you'll find like there's a GitHub workflows, and they've put all the workflows for all the tests which they need to be set there. So one of them is Clippy. This one is for Rust. So this is just a configuration. So for Solidity, you'll find one for Solhint. Also for VS Code, they have like an extension. The Solidity extension also includes the linter for Solidity, so that it can be able to ensure that whatever you're working on, it's following up to the enforced code standards, right? Yeah, so that's something else you need to be keen on, to ensure that once you finish working on something, they run. So sometimes most of these enforcing rules, they work two ways. First of all, the code maintainers may have put the configuration to work before you even commit the pull request. We call them Git pre-commit hooks. So most of the Git pre-commit hooks, there's just some sort of configurations on all the rules. So let's say you finished working on your and on your feature, and you want to now make a pull request, right? Normally you will find like before, once you try to like run the GitHub workflow which I was sharing, this one for working on a feature, and then you git commit, git add. Before you even git commit, once you start, let's say the GitHub workflow, let's say I want to git add all the features that I've worked on, you'll find this hook will like be triggered, and then it will run all the tests which the maintainers want to. So in the event that your work is not up to standard with the enforced rules, they'll now you will not be able to commit to and create a pull request until you are able to fulfill all the set requirements. That's why also it's very good if when you're starting to commit, before going too further, there's also like apart from the main readme file, there's always a contributions markdown file which is in the GitHub repo, which you can always check out just to see all the guidelines and essentially just follow through with all what is set, right? Yeah, so normally you'll have, this is just to ensure, because as many people are working on different things in the same repository, just to ensure the code is uniform across all these things. So normally in the event you don't follow, let's say you don't format and you don't do this, I'll show you an example of what happens. Yeah, so this is another thing that I was working on in Nethermind. So normally you'll see here my commit has an X, right? Because it did not pass all the tests which were set by the maintainers. So when you check what happened, this is an example of all the configurations which were given out, like which were configured by the maintainers, right? So one of the if you check one of the tests which failed on my end, it's a CI commit lint pull request. Now CI commit lint, it means that this is a GitHub action which was set and configured, right? So this GitHub action, it's for committing, the way you commit your work, right? The message you put, right? So normally with commit lint, it's something which people normally configure like as a GitHub actions in their repository to give us enforced set of standards. Example, let's say you've worked on a feature on front end. For git commit, you'll find yourself, I hope you guys can see like my screen. Let me just quickly, okay, yeah. So you find when you're adding, let's say your git commit message, right? Because normally you will like git add, right? And then now for git commit, the message you put based on the if the repository where you're contributing to has the enforced commit linked configurations. You'll find sometimes they have enforced it according to standards. Example, if I've worked for a feature, let's say for a front end feature, right? I've added a new page. So you'll find based on the enforced rules, maybe this is like the set standard that you want. So normally we have this uh, these keywords right here, right? This is for a feature. So you'll find there's a feature for fit for feature. There's a fix where you're fixing something. There's a chore where, let's say, you're working on something which is not really that trivial. Example, maybe you cleaning up or anything, or maybe you putting an extra configuration. Yeah, these are some of the keywords which you use, right? Yeah. So yeah, so once you do that, essentially once you just do all this, it will just help you have a better workflow, right? So once you run all these formatters and all these linters, Prettier normally is working for a JavaScript, and also, so mostly it's for front end, and also if you're doing documentation. By documentation, I mean you can contribute to a documentation, official documentation for projects, right? An example is yeah, this is documentation for Stacknet, which we were working on, very many people. You can see we were like 103 contributors. Right now is archived, so here I am. Okay, so yeah, so normally when you're running contributions, like you can see the last, some of the commit messages is run prettier. So this is just a formatting to ensure everything is up to standard with, because very many people are working on these things, right? Yeah, so that's like the workflow for GitHub. Essentially, in summary, what I'm saying about the guidelines for contribution, you find an issue, you ensure you talk to the maintainers so that you can be assigned to it, and then you start working on the issue, you create a fork of the repository, you clone the repository to your local machine, and then you work on the feature, and then you add tests if there are no tests, and then you submit the pull request. And one important thing is to always communicate with the maintainers. Sometimes with open source, most of the time you find you'll work on something which is new. You might be, let's say, knowing Solidity, but you're deciding to contribute to a project like Celo, right? And you want a feature to be worked on in the Celo, in our testnet or mainnet or in our Celo platform protocol, right? So sometimes you'll find you working on a very new feature. So, and it's okay if you don't understand everything about the project. That's the work of the maintainers to also help you figure out here and there if in case there's something you don't understand, which means before you even start coding, you need to take time to understand the entire architecture of the project, so that it can save you time, so that you can be able to properly work on the feature which you were working on. Yeah, the reason why I'm saying that is, in hindsight, my previous okay, just a second. Yeah, the previous pull request I made, we started working on it before we fully understood the entire architecture. So it took us like around 2 months of give and take, because we did some as you can see, we have so many changes, because we started working on the pull require on the feature. We had not fully understood everything on an end-to-end point of view of how the entire platform looks like. So by the time we were making our changes, we realized later on we had not captured the whatever we had to capture, so we had to redo the entire work again. Yeah, so that's why it's very important to just take time to fully understand the entire system before you work on it, essentially. Yes. Yeah, so these are
That's,
like some of the contribution guidelines.
I think that's great advice. I can also just give everybody the advice before, like I saw people that started working on an issue, but they didn't ask to get it assigned, and then somebody else asked to get it assigned, and then they just merged their pull request, and people wasted their time. So, like as Cyndie said, the most important thing is like talk to the maintainers, get their feedback. One of the things that you can also do in the case that Cyndie explained, where you're not really sure how, if you already found the right solution, is to create a draft pull request, like because a pull request is kind of like, it says, hey, I'm done. Which you're probably not if this is like your first open source contribution. So like just create a draft pull request and say like, hey, I created this. Like if you want to showcase your code to the repository maintainer, the right way to do that would be to create a draft pull request. You wouldn't just like put the link to your forked repository, but you would create a draft pull request and then reach out and say like, hey, this is my train of thought so far. This is like what I've added. Can you give me feedback? And yeah, thank you so much for explaining that so well, Cyndie. I think a lot of people have a way better understanding now. We have a question: how can you safeguard copyright your work? I would say through GitHub's version control, you will automatically be credited with every line of code that you write. And in case, like, I mean, somebody else, that's why I said make sure you get the issue assigned. So your merge request will be merged. If you do something and you say, then somebody else just takes your code and creates the same merge request but got the issue assigned, then that's kind of on you, because you should have started communicating first. That's like really important. But I feel like especially with GitHub, it's very easy to kind of prove what your code is and what your work has been and what you have been doing. So just make sure that really the highest rule is to communicate with the maintainer, to really like not do extra work, to do double the work, to do work that is not needed. So one way of finding a good issue is also always looking for good first issues, but I will show you more about the tags later at the end of this call. Yeah, sure, Michael, ask all the questions that you have.
Yeah,
That's
I
what
could
we're here
add
for.
something. I could
Yeah.
just add something little about the whole issue of safeguarding and copyrighting your work. Normally, with them now, where you're contributing to, most of these projects, they have a license which they've put on GitHub, right? Example is like the MIT license, there's the GNU license, there's the Apache 2.0 license. So all these licenses, they help you figure out because those licenses are like put there to figure out which type of essentially what is it called, what sort of allowances these repositories or rather these platforms have given to like towards people in using their projects. So if you're contributing to open source, mostly it's contributing to maintaining these repositories, of which they have the set licenses in place. Example, if someone has an MIT license, mostly it's just normally with an MIT license, it's that give you free to do whatever you want with this code. You can reuse it, you can rebrand it, you can repackage it. This is also something important if you're working on a project on your own. Take time to figure out the sort of license you can put in like your repository, so that you can, or rather in your work, so that people can figure out based on the license you've set in GitHub, what rights do, or rather what allowances have you given people on whatever to do with your code. Yeah. So when you go to most repositories you want to contribute to, you'll find they have a set license which they've added in like the repository. Yeah.
I think that was a great addition. In general, the next question: how do you decide on what project to make a contribution to? Great question. So for that, there's like places like the Scout game, which we're gonna introduce in a second, which is a great place to start if you're very new to open source contribution. There's also other pages like Only Dust, where Stacknet is present, but also Optimism and like a lot of the big chains. So just go through that, see what language the repository has, if that is a language that you are able to, like a coding language that you're proficient in, and then look for good first issues and see if you can find an issue. There's also some other pages, I think, for contributing to the Ethereum ecosystem, to like Ethereum protocol. There is some great collections. I can share that with you later. in the email afterwards. But yeah, I think there's a lot of great places to get started. And one of them we're going to show in a second. I just wanted to say, I just shared here also a link to the Celo docs where you have this guide kind of, again, just that what Cyndie just went through, like how to contribute to an open source project. We have linked also the Celo Celo repositories in there, but just to make sure and to clarify this, currently as Celo is transitioning from a layer 1 to a layer 2, it's not the right point to contribute to the Celo main repository. You can contribute to the Celo composer, but as soon as we are a layer 2, there will be more issues open for the community to contribute also to the main. Wow, I didn't know that. Happy Open Source Month. We should have said that in the beginning, Cyndie.
I know, yeah. It kind of just hit me right now. I forgot to start by saying like October, because there's this initiative called Hacktoberfest. Although it's not essentially just for, it's not like a Web3 only thing, but yeah, it's called Hacktoberfest. Yeah, so guys can also go check it out. But yeah, October is normally Open Source Month. Yeah.
Yeah. Nice. That's a great reminder. Okay. Before we have like a few more minutes before I'm gonna introduce this Souts Game to everybody and to explain to you what are the repositories and communities that you can already start contributing in Celo, in the Celo ecosystem. But yeah, I wanted to ask you, like, Cyndie, how did you get started? Like, what inspired you to start contributing to open source, and what was like your main blocker or like your main learning that you want to share with everyone?
Okay, so based on my development journey, because I started like learning Rust, and in like my blockchain development journey also, I got like to interact with some of these protocols like Stacknet and Polkadot. And how I started with open source, it's because most of us, we don't have like, especially for those of us who are like self-taught devs with like a background which is not in computer science. So some of the times getting like proper experience when it comes to commercial development, it's not really we don't have that in like our, in our pockets or something. So I decided, since we had like I knew one thing that attracted me to Web3 is like most of the things are open source. So when I started like learning, so what is this open source, and meaning like I can just contribute to I can come into a project and just contribute. This was very like exciting for me. So but the first protocol I was starting to contribute to was like a Stacknet. So that's how we started with like how you mentioned only Dust. So you'd go to the platform and then you just like check all the issues which were there. I'm going to say like it was quite starting out with, it had like a very steep learning curve, because first of all, like most of these repositories, they are very huge. You might be working on a small feature, but you find this work has been done for like, let's say, over 5 years. So it's very daunting at first, understanding the entire architecture and how their system design decisions and all those things. But yeah, like I say, like what I did was just starting out with simple tasks, like example documentation. So if I'm learning, let's say, Celo, and I find there's something I would like to learn about Celo, or I know about it, it's not in like the official docs, or it's not updated in the official docs, I just like just go to the repository where the documentation is being hosted at, because most of these documentations are in the form of like markdown books or Git books. So you just go check, and then you like start an issue. Hey, I've seen this. Can I add this? Can I add that? Yeah, some guys even start with like typo, there's a typo here, Yeah. So essentially that's just how we all started with like open source. I didn't start with like very heavy projects because they're quite daunting. So yeah, you just build, and while you just contribute to open source, you just find you're really upskilling yourself, because you're also learning how to work with a team. So it's giving you like even good info, like how to do GitHub version control, how to work in a team. Yeah. So that's how I started with like a open source. Yeah.
I think one of the things that is so crucial, what you just said, like crucial in learning, is first of all understanding how to create like a clean architecture for a project. I think I can see that in a lot of hackathon projects. Like a lot of beginners, it's so important to work with an existing like bigger project to understand how important like an organized repository and clean code is. But one of the things that I feel like that people need to learn, and it's one of the most important things that you will learn in open source contribution, is how to ask a question and how to ask for help. Because like if you just say this doesn't work, nobody will be able to help you, and also like nobody will give you an answer. It's so important to say like, hey, this is my solution right now. I found this here. This is what I'm referencing. And like the more information you give, the more open the repository maintainers are to like give you feedback and interact with you. So like I think it's a very great school to learn how to communicate with a team, and I think very, very good preparation for actually applying for a job. And yeah, open source contributions are 100% something that you can add to your CV, especially if they are bigger. Cyndie, so I heard you got some rewards also for like contributing to open source. Like, so like how, like, I can imagine like the small contributions, if you like fix a typo for a documentation, you might not get a reward for that. But how did you, like, what was the biggest reward you received, and for what was it?
Um, okay, so with the one thing which Starknet really implemented is they pay their contributors. So we used to contribute, and then the contributions would range in the severity of the bug. If it's a very critical bug, you'd find like let's say $1,000, but they will start with like $250 to continuing, which really helped those of us who don't have jobs, because one thing with open source, it can be a sort of some sort of living. If there's any form of rewards, you don't have necessarily need to have like a corporate 9 to 5 job. You can always work on these issues, enter into also bug bounty, and essentially get paid. Yeah, so that's how we started with like getting rewards for a open source contribution. We also most of the airdrops, essentially for developers, they also help. They also reward people who contribute to open source. It's a very important thing, because you might not get rewards directly from the protocol, because sometimes not every protocol can pay people who produce open source. But if you've contributed to a important, let's say, or rather any most of the protocols, or rather any, like let's say you've contributed to Ethereum core, you've contributed to this, you've contributed to that. Sometimes even when airdrops come out, the allocation that they've given out for developers, you might find yourself there. So that's how we found ourselves getting airdrops for Starknet. We got airdrops from Fluence. Yeah, so if an airdrop is happening for developers, so if you've contributed for a while, you normally find an allocation for you. Yeah, so it might not be directly paying, but yeah, you might get airdrops and all that. Yeah, not to say people should farm. Yeah, just to give not to say people, because let me, I don't know if we have time. I would quickly just share to give the guys like a proper use point of view from how people farm. Just 2 minutes, and then we continue. Yeah, because one issue we're facing. Okay, yeah. Okay, so okay. Yeah, so this is just a point of view of people who spam. Very important topic, which contributor guideline, which we forgot to add, is ensure, as most importantly, essentially, if you are working on something and you're not in communication with the reviewer, let's say you want to add something, ensure you contribution, whether it's an issue you're raising, because still raising issues is also part of contribution. It does not look spammy, right? This is a point of view of a Scroll, the protocol called Scroll. They have like a contribute to Scroll repository, and as you can see, they have over almost 2,000 issues, because most at this time people were hearing Scroll would have like a potential airdrop, so they decided to spam with fake issues. Yeah, so to ensure that because to give the reviewer also an easy time, you just ensure your issue or your pull request is not spam, essentially. Yeah, so all of these are issues. Also with like the Bitcoin book, which is also something I was also going through, I could see there's a time people were creating like to give you just guys an example. Okay, it's like nothing. People would like create GitHub accounts which don't have anything, and just create like spammy pull requests, right? Yeah, so this is just to give you from a maintainer's point of view, it's very important to give them very easy work in reviewing and maintaining your work, because they normally, most of that's like the downside of open source. You'll find some people who want to farm, so they give out spammy issues and pull requests. Yeah, I just wanted to quickly show that. Yeah.
Okay. Like Michael, before I answer your question, let me quickly introduce the game, and I think maybe that helps you understand how to get started. I would not recommend just going wild into GitHub world, because that can be really overwhelming and scary. There is a lot of great places to start off. So what I wanted to show you, first of all, Cindy, thank you so much for sharing all your insights with us. But yeah, so what I wanted to share is, Celo has joined the Scout Game, which has started this Monday. You can sign up here, and they work like this. You will have to sign up to the waitlist, and like every week they accept a few builders into being part of the game. And there's also an article that kind of explains this. This is also great for people that are looking to become more like headhunters, or like scout people. It's a game, and you can read the whole article here on how the incentive mechanism works. Is really to like incentivize builders to contribute to open source, but also to incentivize talent scouts to like really like find good talent, and you can kind of buy NFTs of the builders that you believe in, and then get rewarded once they get rewarded. And it's a really cool concept, because they focus, as other pages like Oni does, really on strengthening builder ecosystems through incentivizing open source contributions. And as mentioned before, for your builders, it's a great way to like get recognized, get reviewed, get support, and maybe even and just like growing in the ecosystem, and maybe even finding a job. Like people have, like through contributing to open source projects, they have found part-time jobs or sometimes full-time jobs. So it's not promised and you cannot expect it, but it happens if you become like a long-term contributor, right? The projects that are currently participating in the Celo ecosystem is Mentor. I hope most of you might know what Mentor is. Mentor is a stablecoin platform. They do not only focus on dollar-pegged stablecoins, but also regional, as mentioned before. For example, the Kenyan shilling just launched, and they have a few repositories that you can contribute to. Actually, you will be able, like, let me just show to you quickly my screen. Okay, so So let me. So most of the repositories that are shared have these little tags, and they also have different kind of what do you call it? Tiers, like common, epic, and rare, which is kind of related to the amount of work. Like here you can also see the points that you receive for these tickets, and you can, like, there's actually 5 tiers, like legendary and mythic as well, and you will receive also related to your pull requests and related to the closed issues, you will also receive charm points. So like taking part in this game, you will receive charm points and you will receive the rewards from the ecosystem. Celo is not the only chain participating in this game, so you can also contribute to a lot of other ecosystem, like Optimism, for example. Some other super chain partners are taking part in this. So and a lot of different chains, and Celo is one of them. So yeah, make sure that you sign up. And there's also a pre-game that makes you get approved faster, or the opportunity to get approved faster. Coming back to the repositories that we have, as mentioned, don't contribute to the main Celo repositories, as we are right now transitioning to a layer 2 from a layer 1. So a lot of the code will be updated, so the issues are not really related to the work that has to be done. But yeah, Mentor, they offered a few different repositories. Valora, it's the Celo wallet. It's a very, very cool wallet, in case you don't know yet about it. It's focused on stable coins, on in general on Celo tokens, and they provided their hooks repository. Then we have Good Dollar, which is a UBI, Hypercerts that kind of support impact tracking, Glow Dollar, a stablecoin for funding public goods. Then Uberswap, it's a Celo focused DEX, and Gitcoin that probably most of you know, which provides grants programs. Throughout the next 3 months, this program is running for 3 months. Every week, all the pull requests will be evaluated, and the people that have closed pull requests will get rewarded. And we have a prize pool of 5K currently from the Celo side. If all of this is going to be a success, we might top that up. But right now, it's just who comes first, and the rewards get distributed for the first close pull request until the pool is empty, and yeah, it runs for 3 months. We might add more repositories. There might be more issues being added. But overall, just make sure to sign up to the game. And of course, it's open to you to start contributing, but only through the game you will receive rewards right now. But also, just wanted to put this out here, Celo Public Goods has like 2 or 3 more rounds planned this year, for some kind of like rewards for our community. So even if you're not part of the Scout Games yet, you could also work on different issues in general, just contribute to the ecosystem, and then maybe just take part in one of these rounds that fit you, and just share your closed pull requests. Obviously, closed pull requests are worth the most, because it actually shows that the repository maintainers thought this was a useful contribution. If you just have a pull request that nobody was interested in, then maybe you did not communicate, as Cyndie said earlier. You did not communicate properly, and you wasted your time on something. Overall, we really believe open source contributions will help you level up in a different way than hackathons, because you work on existing code, you work with more professional people together, and and you also contribute to something that will not be closed after you finish a hackathon. So we hope all of you have, we'll really enjoy that. Please also share all the feedback that you have for us. We are very open. This is the first time that we're running something like this, and it's also their first round. So if you have any feedback, please feel free to reach out on Telegram, on Twitter. My handle is this everywhere. So Michael, to your question, for a first timer, give you a framework of thinking, how to find a project and how to contribute. I would suggest learn about Web3 before you start contributing, and then find a project that you're interested in. I think contributing to Web3 without having any formal knowledge about like how the code works, how Solidity works, will be very complicated and frustrating, because you will not fully understand what you're contributing to. So I think you will make your own life very hard by doing that. And I think it's always great to join programs like educational programs that prepare you. Like, I think there's so many great Web3 projects out there that that onboard you with great study groups, that introduce you to great ecosystem projects that have good first issues. But I think even Googling good first issues in Ethereum will lead you to a great way. But yeah, my recommendation would be, at least, even if you approach a repository and you look for a good first issue, maybe try to understand what they are doing, because just reading the code without understanding what they are doing will again lead you into frustration, because you're not fully understanding everything. Could you say what was your chat path like? I'm not sure I understand, Cyndie. Maybe you understand this question.
And from the first one, what was the chat path like? For both of, from a total neophyte, I think maybe he's talking about like the entire chat, like a roadmap to contributing from like someone who's completely new. Which, like, to just add on what you said, first of all, learning the basic, I mean, the foundation, like whether it's Web3, the foundation of blockchain, how does blockchain work, the entire system, how does it work? So if you're contributing to, let's say, a layer 2 in the entire blockchain ecosystem, how do all these things work together? Is it like just understanding the basics of blockchain, and also getting to at least become familiar with the programming language, because it might be really hard if, let's say, you want to contribute to, let's say, Golang or a Solidity project, and another programming language, right? So also being familiar with the programming language used, it's very to make your work easier for you and also for the maintainer. So just start with the basics, understand the basics of whatever you want to work on, whether it's Web3, understand the basics of the programming language, also understand fully how version control works. By that I mean how GitHub works, how Git works, so that you make it easier for everyone who's working with you, because with open source, you most probably not work alone. You work with a lot of people, to make it easier for everyone and a seamless contribution, so that your changes do not like break the entire production, right? So those are some of the that's some of the part of the roadmap on like fully contributing to open source.
I agree. Understanding how to use GitHub is one of the main deal breaker that I also saw for people. Like, it's not even about knowing how to code. A lot of people learn how to code in like web IDEs and like on Udemy, and you don't really learn how to use your IDE like Visual Studio Code and like GitHub. I recommend everybody who is not comfortable with that to like just watch free Free Code Academy or something it's called, and they have 3 or 4 or 5 hours of material on how to use GitHub and how to use your IDE like Visual Studio Code. Take that time and actually do that, because otherwise you will waste so much time being frustrated and also not being professional. Like, it's worth investing the time, and it's like knowledge that is the most basic knowledge that is necessary to start contributing to open source. So I just wanted to say, to sign up to this game, just follow Celo on Webcast. In our top post, we announced the participation in Souts Game. So just also the sign up works through Webcast. So just follow Celo on Webcast and sign up, and also text me when you've done so and let me know. And I think that's it from our side. If you have any more questions, Michael, in my opinion, I think it would be really helpful for you to start with a coding bootcamp, or with, I'm not sure where you live, but Celo Africa DAO also has code jams in Nigeria, Kenya, Uganda, Ghana, and South Africa. So I think that's a great way to start learning. South Africa DAO chapter is also doing some hackathons sometimes. And there's a lot of online educational material too about Web3. So I think that's a great way to get started, because if you're new to coding, open source contributions might not be the way for you. Do at least one bootcamp before you start doing that. That's my recommendation. Patrick Collins is really a great way to start. Thank you so much. And also follow Celo Africa DAO. They have a lot of amazing resources, amazing programs, and and also obviously to stay up to date with the Scout game and with all the offers that Celo has for our developers. Make sure to follow Celo Dev's account. And Cyndie, do you have anything else that we should share with the build? Any last advice? Don't be shy. Don't be shy. Communication.
Yeah, the only thing I can say is just it's okay to feel like overwhelmed with open source, because it's not quite easy. It's not quite an easy journey, because most of the time you'll find yourself working with like really, like I said, complex architectures, but it really helps in the long term. And most of the people also contributing to open source, some of the time it's their first time also contributing. And don't be scared if you make mistakes, because we all made especially with formatting, we've all made contributions and they break production, so many things. So just start. It's okay to look like you don't know what you're doing. It's okay, because very many people they started out also as beginners, and most of the time the difference between you and the maintainer, it's just that the maintainer has worked on this for so long, they've understood the entire architecture, right?
Exactly.
And sometimes open source is like a way to even get a job, because when you regularly contribute some to the same repository, they can even decide, okay, let's just take you up in our developer team. So just you can just start with something simple as you continue to build up on open source.
Exactly. Well, everyone, thank you so much for joining. And don't forget to claim your POAP in the event. It's now added. So if you signed up through Lemonade Social, you can now go to the event page and claim your POAP for today's workshop. And thank you so much for joining. Thank you, Cyndie, for being here and sharing all your knowledge. It was lovely to see you again. And everybody have a lovely evening. Bye-bye. Thank you so much for joining today. Bye.
Bye.